Chapter 9, Beyond Disbelief. Quote, "It would be a great mistake for speeches to be made on this subject, for it would serve to draw attention to the matter and things could well become a great deal worse because of the kind of public excitement it would stir." Close quote. Letter from Bishop of Truro, 26 May 1989. On 1 April 1989, Britain held its first conference for professional therapists and detectives to discuss the phenomenon of satanic ritual abuse. It was organized by the Association of Christian Psychiatrists and took place within the headquarters of the Royal Society of Medicine in London. It was also held in secret. The conference convener was a psychiatrist called Dr. Russell Blacker. He had wanted the event to take place so that the subject could be aired in public, a method he believed of creating a more widespread understanding of the problem. But he encountered opposition not just to this open-door policy, but to the very idea of holding the seminar at all. One psychiatrist, a consultant to an NSPCC child abuse team, wrote to Blacker, quote, "The presence of reporters can cause problems at ordinary psychiatric meetings. At this meeting, the contribution of what appears to be a large number of non-ACP members and the press sounds to me like a recipe for disaster, or at least a sensational and unhelpful exposure of the ACP to international publicity. My unsolicited advice would be to cancel the whole thing." Close quote. The general thrust of that letter, and many others with it, was that the subject of satanic ritual abuse is too disturbing for the public to hear. This view is shared not just by psychiatrists, but by lawyers who refuse to trust juries with the evidence of rituals in child abuse cases, by detectives and social workers who fear a backlash of prejudice, from reporters who dread being branded as sensationalist gutter hacks, and even by the Church of England, the very organization which would appear to have a vested interest in speaking out. This concluding chapter is about tackling those fears and facing up to the unpalatable lessons we need to learn if such abuse is to be stopped or prevented. It makes a series of recommendations, some new, some old, which, if taken together, could present a blueprint for an immediate government response. But first, we need to examine the fear that lies behind the response from the established Church in England. Why, when the crusading, if unpredictable, evangelical alliance makes so much noise about ritual abuse, do the bishops stay silent? The answer is that they, perhaps above all others, believe that there is danger in recognizing the problem, not a danger of adverse publicity or a media backlash, but a spiritual danger to themselves and others. Canon Dominic Walker is the Church of England's main expert on Satanism and the most experienced counselor of its victims, a dark and gentle man whose quiet demeanor and unassuming study in his Brighton rectory make a refreshing contrast to the feverish evangelism of the EA and Reach Out. Walker sees around 6 adult survivors a year. Quote, "The people who come to me tend to be referred from other areas. I am the chairman of the Church of England study group on exorcism and the occult, so I generally get asked to see the hard cases. I've been seeing that number of adults for several years now. I sit and talk with them quietly and individually. I listen to what they have to say. Usually it does comprise the same sort of details: child abuse, murder, drugs, prostitution, and occasionally cannibalism. Quite often, these people will tell me the names of those they say were involved. Sometimes they are the people who control the groups. Other times, they are the names of famous or highly respected people. A number of survivors independently gave me the name of a particular MP as being involved. I don't believe there was any collusion in their stories because they were separated by some long period of time. But when I have finished counseling a victim, I always tear up any notes I have made. I make a point of destroying anything which has recorded the satanic detail. I don't believe it is a good idea to have that material kept in the house. Have I ever passed on the information I have been given? No, I have not. I do not believe that would be proper." Close quote. This attitude, sincere and gently expressed, is part of the problem. It is an old saw, but true for all that for evil to triumph, it is only necessary for good men to do nothing. Whilst satanic ritual abuse has a spiritual element, the solution is not primary religious, although it is an undeniable fact that many of its victims turn first to the church. That they do so often is because the secular agencies have ignored or rejected them is unfortunate. That the church then keeps their potentially vital evidence from the state's authorities is simply unforgivable. What then is to be done? Do we need new laws? Should there be a different type of policing in such cases? How can we protect the children in therapy while at the same time preserving their evidence? A little over a year ago, I argued publicly that so far behind was this country in understanding any form of child sexual abuse that we needed to hold a formal commission of inquiry into all its manifestations. That call was made in a previous book, but broadcast on most television networks and in dozens of newspapers. It still has to be heeded. Instead, the British government announced in March 1991 that it was to fund a 2-year study into ritual abuse by the respected Academy authority, Professor Jean Lafontaine. Welcome as this development has been, it is flawed from the start because it will allow the questions of therapy and law enforcement in ritual abuse cases to be considered without reference to the existing and major problems in handling ordinary sexual abuse cases. For Professor Lafontaine's research to have a chance of being successfully followed through, all aspects of the incidents, nature, and responses to every type of child sexual abuse needs to be openly examined by a royal commission. For that reason, it must head this list of recommendations. 10 specific proposals. Number 1, the establishment of a royal commission of inquiry into all aspects of pedophilia and child sexual exploitation. Its hearings must be held in public unless there is a compelling personal safety reason for a witness to work in camera. I have previously argued that one of the myriad specialist House of Commons committees would be up to this task. In the past 12 months, however, it has become clear that MPs have too many other demands on their time, too many potential conflicts of interest, church attendance, or vocal constituency groups to handle the ritual abuse inquiry. For this reason, it needs to be organized as a formal royal commission. 2, the Select Committee on Health, however, should institute its own hearings into the incidence of multi-personality disorder. Available evidence from the United States would suggest that Britain is locking a number of MPD sufferers in secure mental units when they could, given a greater understanding of the condition, be treated as outpatients. 3, the Royal Commission hearings would, I believe, undoubtedly highlight the desperate need for a unified and multidisciplinary national approach to child sexual exploitation, whatever its motive. Britain needs to add to its established network of specialist nationalist police teams one charged with policing child sex. Such a unit should comprise officers from the Obscene Publications Branch, existing child protection teams, HM Customs, the Post Office, trained therapists, and members of the Metropolitan Police Criminal Intelligence Division C11. It should have its own secure database on the police national computer and work both nationally and throughout the world. 4, the expertise and intelligence developed by this unit would have a vital role to play in the next new agency, a National Child Protection Agency. This would fulfill 3 functions. It would analyze trends within the field of child exploitation, would maintain computerized records of all convicted child abusers and of missing or at-risk children. No such database exists in Britain at present. And, perhaps most importantly, would create a unified and reliable training program for all therapists and investigators within statutory agencies. 5, this training needs to take place urgently. The number of seminars teaching the realities of child sexual abuse and pedophilic behavior is woefully inadequate. Under the auspices of the National Child Protection Agency, regular and compulsory workshops and conferences should be held throughout Britain. 6. In recognition of this, pressure must be brought to bear on the network of voluntary and unmonitored support groups, religious or not, to cease what is in many cases maverick behavior. All child abuse counseling would be the responsibility of statutory agencies. To conduct any such sessions should, and would under these proposals, require a specific license. In this way, the dangers of contaminating victims' evidence could be minimized. 7. Additionally, all disclosure interviews should be conducted by a registered and specifically trained therapist and recorded on videotape. The practice of requiring a child victim to repeat his or her testimony time after time to a variety of different agencies should be stopped dead by this proposal. That practice is genuine, secondary abuse and is inexcusable. The training must include instruction on the techniques needed to avoid leading questions. These tapes should thereafter be admissible as evidence into court. The government should accept the findings of its own 1990 Peugeot inquiry, which recommended precisely this. 8. To achieve this end, a new court structure would be required. There has been an unanswerable case for all unified family court in England and Wales for nearly a decade. This proposal would require such a court to be established outside the restraints of the rest of the judicial system. Its method of operation should be inquisitorial rather than accusatorial, as at present. It would discard all the 18th century costumes so beloved of judges and lawyers in recognition of the simple fact that these frequently confuse and or terrify young children. There is, of course, a precedent for setting up a new judicial system in Ulster's Diplock courts, where the judge sits on his own without a jury in certain terrorist cases. The proposed family court would bear no resemblance to this highly dubious system. The example merely shows that the unthinkable can be achieved if the problem is perceived to be sufficiently serious. Wardship orders, if retained at all, should be used sparingly and with intelligence. It is pointless to obtain wardship to protect a child in a potential prosecution and then condemn him or her to disclosing to foster parents whose evidence may or may not subsequently be accepted. 9. A new law must be added to the statute book, one which formally recognizes as a separate criminal activity the abuse of children in any rituals, satanic or not. There is a model statute for this in existence in Idaho, which avoids the indiscriminate approach of Jeffrey Dickens' amendment to the Criminal Justice Bill. The reason why such a statute is needed is that it would recognize ritual abuse as a more serious, long-lasting exploitation than ordinary molestation, and would force detectives and Crown prosecution lawyers to pursue the most substantive charge available. 10. The quid pro quo for this, and one long overdue, is the formal recognition in English law of all minority religions. This would extend to the protection of the law to Muslims and Buddhists, as well as Wiccans and neo-pagans. That it would probably require the disestablishment of the Church of England can be viewed, in the final analysis, as a minor procedural problem rather than a fundamental constitutional obstacle. 10 proposals to change the way we protect children. None of them are cheap, but then none of them are prohibitively expensive. Politically, this program cuts across all party divides. The major political groups in Britain each have policies and sensibilities diametrically opposed to its ingredients. Which is more important, politics or children's lives? Postscript. When Emma Eckstein consulted Sigmund Freud, she told him of her involvement in a type of ritualized sex abuse he had never heard of before. The child talked of a devil pricking her with pins, of being forced to consume blood, and of the draining of blood from other children's bodies with needles. She also told the therapist while under hypnosis that she had endured a ceremony in which part of her labia minora had been cut off, and the perpetrators had sucked up the resulting blood. Following which, Freud later wrote, quote, "The child was given a piece of skin to eat," close quote. Freud puzzled long and hard over the disclosure, not least because a medical examination confirmed the girl's claim about the mutilation of her vagina. In the end, he could find only one explanation. Quote, "I dream, therefore, of a primeval devil religion whose rites are carried on secretly, and I understand the harsh therapy of the witches' judges," close quote. Freud presented this in 1896 in a paper he called The Etiology of Hysteria. When he read it to the Society for Psychiatry and Neurology in Vienna, he outlined his belief that a patient's mental illness, he called it hysteria, stemmed from a violent infantile sexual scene, and that these experiences were real. Patients, he said, including Emma Eckstein, were telling the truth. 7 years later, Freud retreated from this position. He began to claim that the patient's stories must be fantasy. He could not, by 1903, bear to think the unthinkable. 95 years later, we face the same challenge. Do we believe automatically, or do we accept the possibility that what is before us could be real? The victims of satanic abuse, children like Natalie, know the answer. Quote, "Maybe fear makes people disbelieve. I can only say what happened and hope you'll listen. Just be me for a while. You should have lived through what I did. Just be my cousins still going through it. If you won't listen, then there's nothing left." Close quote. Appendix 1, a survey of ritual child abuse cases. Set out below in tabular form are the results of Pamela Hudson's survey of ritual child abuse symptoms and allegations, what have become known as key indicators, conducted in April 1988. The research sample was small. It took in one child from each of 11 reported and documented cases of ritual abuse by employing a simple yes-no questionnaire approach with space for comments, but it covers unrelated cases across the USA. The survey sampled the responses of adults responsible for the children at the point of disclosure. I am indebted to Pamela Hudson for permission to reproduce the tables here. Those seeking further information and advice can contact Ms. Hudson at P.O. Box 807, Mendocino, California, 95460, USA. Copies of her book Ritual Child Abuse, Discovery, Diagnosis, and Treatment, R&E Publishers, January 1991, are available from the same address. A survey of ritual child abuse cases, symptoms, and allegations by Pamela S. Hudson, LCSW, April 1988. And I will put a screenshot of this for y'all to look at, but don't make it too big. So I'm just going to read these ritual abuse symptom cluster in young victims. 1, compulsive erotic behavior, acting out the sex acts. 2, a sudden extreme fear of the bathroom, bathing, washing, rain. 3, nightmares, night terrors, night sweats. 4, extremely high anxiety, fearful of being separated from parents, school refusal. 5, hyper-aggressive temper tantrums, oppositional behavior, school disruptiveness. 6, sudden eating disorder, refuses meat, ketchup, spaghetti, tomatoes. 7, fearful of going to bed, the dark, resisting bedtime, will not sleep alone. 8, vomiting for no apparent reason, abdominal pain. Under that, it says allegations. 1, child was molested by other children, child group sex. 2, child was molested by adult strangers, daycare workers. 3, Child reported the following types of physical or psychological abuse. A. Reports being locked inside a jail or cage. B. Reports telling that abusers threatened to kill their parents, siblings, or pets if they told. And at the bottom of this is a list of 7 different daycare centers and the children having those indicators or not. Some more indicators. Was buried or put inside caskets, coffins, or boxes. Was held under water. Was threatened with guns or knives. Child was injected, drugged, or poked with needles. Children were photographed or filmed during abuse. Children were tied by ropes, hung from hooks, placed in closets, spread over inverted pentagram or inverted cross. Child describes abusers wearing robes, masks, having candles. Children were forced to participate in mock marriages. Children were defecated and urinated upon and forced to ingest both. Children observed animals tortured and killed. Children described being given fake operations. Children described the torture and sexual assault of others or of themselves. Evidential medical examination. Findings commensurate with sexual assault. Children described small children and babies being killed, carved up, and eaten by participants, sometimes including themselves. And there's more to this. Children report being taken away from the care provider, traveling by car, airplane, helicopter, boats, or submarines. Children describe being taken to churches, other daycare centers, and graveyards for more terrorizing, torture, and sexual abuse. And you'll see the children's answers there, the parents of the children, their answers. Appendix 2, Guidelines for Investigating Ritual Abuse. Ritual crime presents a unique challenge to the law enforcement investigator. No other category offending is as difficult to define or as complicated to understand. Sandy Gallant has researched ritual and crime for more than a decade and has drawn from her casework a checklist of the most important ground rules when handling apparently ritually motivated incidents. These are appended below with her comments where appropriate. As with Pamela Hudson, I am grateful to Officer Gallant for her time and assistance. Quote, ritual crime is something that is difficult to define because it is something which has developed in the minds of the perpetrators. It may come from their own sense of spirituality. It is also important for the investigator to keep in mind that there are many people who use rituals as part of their system of beliefs who are not involved in criminality at all. You may also find that there is another group which is involved in criminality and which incorporates rituals into their particular crimes. They may be acting alone. They may not necessarily be part of any organized group. A ritualistic crime may be committed against property or against persons. It can involve church desecration, the desecration of cemeteries or bodies therein, burglaries, very specifically those in which religious artifacts are taken, systematic cases of sexual abuse, in some instances suicides, and even homicides. Ritual abuse is best described as a systematic series of emotional, physical, and sexual encounters designed to instill fear in the victim and to enforce conformity. Rarely will you find that a ritual abuser is a pedophile, although some may be involved in pornography. All place a positive value on the harming of children, but the interest in such harm is not necessarily sexual. Indicators of ritual abuse for the investigator will include multiple suspects, multiple victims, the usage of certain types of ceremonies, robes, masks, goats' heads, the usage of blood, urine, and feces as part of the ceremony. We have begun to develop procedural guidelines to assist police officers in the proper investigation of these cases. Hopefully, these will help them towards successful prosecutions in court. It is, however, important to remember that the most vital aspect in this whole area is that of protecting the child. 1. Document all information as you receive it. This is probably the most important thing to do throughout. 2. Clearly define the roles of investigators, social workers, doctors, and psychiatrists at an early stage of the investigation. 3. Tape all interviews so that you can maintain clarity as to precisely who originated what information. 4. Approach the prosecuting authority in the very early stages of the investigation so that you can ascertain the best approach to take. 5. Keep all information confidential for as long as possible. 6. Avoid tainting or contamination of evidence when you question children, such as by asking leading questions. This also needs to be pointed out to parents, custodians, and to any party involved in the case at the very early stage during investigation. 7. Build your case on only that information for which you are able to produce documented types of evidence or on information that you have been able to validate. If you are dealing with a potentially ritualistic killing, there are some specific aspects you should look for or be aware of. 1. The location of the body. Rituals are frequently held in very isolated locations like woods, open parkland, old army bunkers, perhaps tunnels or caves. 2. Missing body parts, both internal and external. Testicles, semen, and menstrual blood are regarded as having a high religious significance within some ritual groups. 3. Incisions or stab wounds. If they have been made in certain patterns, this could be important. 4. Identification marks. Certain tattoos or needle marks, very specifically in the armpits or on the bottom of the feet. 5. Was the body painted in any way? If so, what color paint was used? Was there any pattern to the way the body was painted? 6. Certain types of powders or oils found on the body. These could be important because we have found that certain powders or oils are used as mind-controlling substances. 7. Brand marks or scourging. 8. Feces or urine or blood found smeared on the body or the absence of blood in the body. We would suggest that police officers should look for these specifics. In general, the investigators should photograph the scene of the crime as soon as you get there, document all of the indicators you find, do not state any conclusions in the report as to what you believe these may mean. It is difficult, if not impossible, to believe that these types of crimes are occurring, but in fact they are. It is extremely important, therefore, that frontline police officers be able readily to identify the indicators of ritual crimes. You need to be methodical in your pursuit, accurate in your documentation, and you need to believe that these crimes are real. Although no longer actively working on ritual crimes, Officer Gallant is prepared to assist official investigators with background information. She occasionally assists investigations on a consultancy basis. She may be contacted at this address. Officer Sandy Bargioni. Gallant was her name before a recent marriage. Intelligence Division, San Francisco Police Department, Room 558, 850 Bryant, San Francisco, California, 94103, USA. And this book was written in the 80s, so I don't know that she's available. And under this are the notes, which I have placed after each chapter. So let's see, when was this copyrighted? I can find it. Copyright 1991. So that was 35 years ago. Thank you all for listening, and I hope you got a lot out of this book. I did.